Come now, all you mangy dogs. Swab the decks and hoist the sails. The guns on board be needing some proper manning. Pieces of 8 and a fine wench on your arm. If your work be not too shoddy. Careful not to flounder too badly, though, or you may have to dance the hempen jig as we see you to Davy Jones. Exactly, my boy. On with the show.
Welcome, everybody, friends, folks, foes, and fellow pirate mateys, to our latest Friday night edition of the Pirate Radio Podcast feature show. Our guest this week is none other than Paññobhāsa Bhikkhu. We have a couple overviews and descriptions here, bios, essentially, information that has been provided to us. One straight off of his minds.com profile, another which we have posted up on YouTube. So, former resident of Aberdeen, Washington, home to the famous grunge band Nirvana, John David Reynolds grew up in the Pacific Northwest, surrounded by logging trucks, flannel shirts, baseball caps, and drunken Tahola Indians. Partying hard with his fair share of wine, women, and song, something within the young rebel's heart was also driving him to renounce the world and ultimately become a mendicant of sorts. Yet the transformation wouldn't all suddenly occur overnight. With a bachelor's degree in marine biology, Reynolds spent the next few years as a fisheries biologist, continuing to embrace the high life whenever the opportunity presented itself. Finally, around 1988, he became seriously interested in seeking ordainment as a Buddhist monk. However, it wasn't until 3 years later his search finally met with success. Shortly hereafter, the man, now known as Paññobhāsa Bhikkhu, relocated overseas to Burma, where he spent approximately the next 30 years practicing and pursuing his spiritual path. Join us over Skype with pretty much all topics on the table. We are presently connecting here via South Korea to a California-based Burmese monastery. Before we get to Paññobhāsa Bhikkhu, speaking to him, we're just going to see if, in fact, Reverend Jim has himself made it up to the crow's nest. He was on his way up there, of course. Always a great place to have the vantage point, opportunity to see what we have happening and occurring this week.
Jeffy.
That's great. So yeah, other than the weather, how would you assess things?
Well, we're not getting out on D Live right now, so I've directed everybody over to YouTube or my page for our D Live patrons that might pop in.
Jeez.
And I've got, yeah, we're still having some type of snafu.
That's fine. That's no. I've got it covered here. Asleep at the wheel. It's just there's so many bloody things to take care of. Thank you for drawing that to my attention. So we are going to be we're hitting D Live right now. I can pretty
Okay.
much guarantee you. So yes, thank you for mentioning that. Anything else?
No, that should be about it. I'm looking forward to hearing our guest because I know very little about Buddhisms or monks or any of that good stuff, and I've always been curious. You know, we know about the Shaolins and all that, the martial arts, and a lot of that's hype and a lot of it's not. But there's other aspects of it that I've always been intrigued by. So I'm just gonna shut up and listen.
Yeah, and just a further point of interest here, Pirate Larry, we had been expecting would be showing up and wanting to participate in this week's show. I'm not sure if we're going to find him maybe popping up via the YouTube chat area or not. Our numbers are looking really great. We're already up to almost 15 people join us via YouTube. So thank you, folks, for your support. Hope you'll stick around.
Well, we had somebody subscribe. Well, they showed up just because of our guest, and they said they've already subscribed. So that's over on YouTube.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. And just to let listeners know as well that our guest this week is somebody who came to us. Well, there's a couple things actually going on. One, we had seen him present out on minds.com for some time, posting here and there some sometimes provocative, often insightful, and just, decent quality content. And I think it was just a short time after that we crossed paths in viewing him actually over on Brian Rue's channel. Who Brian is somebody who I think he's been deplatformed. Well, not too many places yet, I don't think. Although YouTube might be one area, one place where that has in fact occurred, unfortunately. So, but yeah, Brian Rue, Bante, I think is how, that's one way that we can refer to you as well this week, oh venerable one. But yeah, thanks for dropping in. The Brian Rue connection is quite interesting, I would say, and we've had him on our show a couple times, and he's spoken with us, and not as many times as is the case with you. The amount of content that he has archived with you is just amazing, and the talks the two of you have are great. I've been binge watching actually the last couple days your shows, so thank you so much for that quality content and the conversations the two of you put together. We're going to be making a donation probably to both of you, as a matter of fact, this Christmas as part of our Operation Secret Santa campaign. So welcome to Skullport Harbor.
Yes, hail and ahoy.
There we go. Yeah. So, finally, we're seeing some of your pictures pop up here in the slideshow. So this is great. The photos that you sent our way are really quite wonderful and amazing. Via your time in
Yes.
Burma, of course, just really, really great stuff there. So
Yeah, most of it came from just my last few years in Burma when I finally obtained a camera.
did you move around a lot?
Inside Burma, you mean?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
Yeah, actually I did. I moved around quite a lot. Lived in several different places.
Okay. And is that standard operational procedure routine for the monks that they do these sort of things, or they typically stay stationed or just based out of one location or monastery?
Well, Asian monks usually, once they find a good place, they tend to stay there. unless they get senior enough that then they like the abbot will start a branch monastery and like send them off to be like the new abbot of some new branch monastery. But I really didn't follow the Burmese way of being a monk, so I was always pretty much of a loner and avoided monasteries usually.
How about that? Isn't that something? So you got along with the other monks and so-called, Sangha, as they're known, I would imagine. There wasn't too much conflict or anything like that.
Yeah. As a general rule, I got along with them. Although partly it was because I was like the strange foreigner. So I got special privileges or something. That they let me get away with stuff that Asian monks wouldn't get away with.
Did you engage them in speaking to them through English or Burmese or a little of both? What was the deal?
When I first got to Burma, all I spoke was a little bit of Pali, which is like the ancient Indian language that the Theravadan scriptures are written in. And I was such a fanatic at first, I didn't even want to learn Burmese because I didn't want to waste my time in small talk with people. So I figured if I only knew Pali, which is like the scriptural language, then I'd only be able to talk with like learned monks. But it turned out that it didn't work out very well. So that the first monastery I lived at in Burma, I didn't speak Burmese and nobody there spoke English. And so I was like trying to communicate through broken Pali with this other monk who had some schooling. And so that didn't work so well. So I eventually had to take a crash course in Burmese.
That's great. I've done something similar here myself. Not a monk. That living in South Korea, you pick up a lot of things along the way. Of course, I've been here nearly, not quite 20 years now, so my Korean still is pretty god awful. But inevitably, you find yourself absorbing a lot of the culture and history and customs and so forth. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you let's back up a little bit then, because we wanted to start with how it was. Your father was a huge influence, I think, if I'm not mistaken, and that with the bio you sent us, he was a really open-minded guy. I think he might have been a veteran of World War II and a real spiritual seeker. Was he a vet as well?
Yeah. He actually killed Germans.
Oh, I'm sure Brian really loved that idea.
Well, it was his duty, He's just doing his job.
Right. Just following orders. So was he a pilot or was he an infantryman or what?
He started off as like a combat medic, but then eventually became like an infantry sergeant.
How about that? Yeah. I looked into becoming a medic myself before leaving for Korea, actually. That was the only job I was really interested in at the time, out of Edmonton. And this is part of the reserves, Canadian reserves. And they ended up telling me that it was a pretty dangerous job, believe it or not. So
yeah, that's what my father used to say. It's like the medic has to go where the stupidest dumbass in the whole unit went in order to like save him, because he's lying there bleeding to death.
Yeah. Hope that nobody shoots you while you're at it, but it's a kind of flip of the coin, I guess, really. So.
Well, that big red cross they wear on their helmet makes a great target. And believe me, they do not respect the laws that you don't shoot medics. There's no laws in war.
Right. Well, I think really through documentaries and just what I've read, it's like I said, I think it's about 50-50. It just depends on the individual who's, they got the potential to take somebody out in that context, whether they let them, return to safety or not. So, anyways, I can understand things, I suppose, from both perspectives. But going back to your father, what sort of topics was he interested in that sort of influenced you?
Well, my father started off with what he called the occult, which actually he got interested in when he was in the army, because he was interested in hypnosis. and he learned that an injured soldier who's in shock causes like a hypnotic suggestive state, so that you could tell a soldier that's in shock that he doesn't feel the pain, that he's going to restrict blood flow to the wounded area to reduce blood loss and this kind of stuff, and it actually works. So that he was called the voodoo medic for a while in his unit. And so he was interested in hypnosis. He started off through hypnosis. And then his second wife, not my mother, turned out to be an extremely good hypnotic subject, like Edgar Cayce level psychic abilities. So then he got really interested in past life regressions, and let's see what else. Started experimenting with like witchcraft and other quote occult unquote areas of study, and so he was so open-minded that probably a lot of people consider him to be rather nuts. But yeah, he was just really open-minded. And when I was a kid, I'd be sitting on his lap, and instead of watching TV, he'd be telling stories about like astral traveling and past life regressions and that sort of thing.
Was he able to recall any of his past lives?
Yeah, he remembered a few of them vividly. So I heard a lot about that sort of thing too. So he was a firm believer in reincarnation, and he considered himself to be a Buddhist also, which of course kind of was like an open door for me. Although it turns out that his Buddhism was pretty sketchy. He was actually more of like a pagan or an animist or something than a Buddhist. But he liked the idea that there is no God deciding what is good and what is evil, that ultimately it depends upon your own mental states. But then he kind of took a little farther than Orthodox Buddhism and kind of had this idea that you can decide what is right or wrong for yourself. But actually, Buddhism doesn't go that far.
What's really interesting is we have a conscience, the human conscience, that when we do certain things, we know they're wrong. And when we do other things, we know intuitively, deep down that it's the right thing to do, if you follow what I'm getting at. And
yeah,
and then of course there's sociopaths, all too many sociopaths, narcissists, and so forth in the world, but then ultimately psychopaths as well, if you take it to the furthest extreme. So, which in that instance, I guess something happens to their human conscience, where it's maybe, what is it, destroyed or suppressed? What's going on there?
With regard to a sociopath, it's hard to say exactly, because as far as I can tell, I'm not one. But yeah, I think you can say that. I mean, going with sort of woo-woo, like metaphysical talk, like a fully enlightened being would be sort of transparent. It would be sort of like light is just shining through them, and a person that, like the average person, is just kind of like translucent, sort of like a bathroom window or something that's kind of foggy or something. But like a sociopath would be like completely at the opposite end, where they'd be almost opaque, where there'd be like almost no light shining through them, or no access to like a higher level of truth, something like that.
So I'm not totally clear if you would address the business of like a psychopath, basically. What happens with, why is it that they seem to lack the standard moral human conscience that we're all encoded with, that we seem to carry as part of our I'm not sure if it's DNA or if it's conditioning, or I kind of lean in the direction of thinking it's innate, and that it's just human instinct. It comes as part of the package, really, when we're born. But
yeah, I think there's a lot of variation between people, though. And,
right.
People can just get really messed up, like when they're kids or something.
Sure.
It just kind of what's the word? Kind of maims them psychologically.
They lose it.
So that yeah. Or they're just hurting so bad that they just want to hurt others so that they can kind of feel better just through comparison. I think there are some people who are like that. They're just so miserable, so unhappy. Like Tiberius Caesar, for example, he used to just enjoy watching people getting tortured to death. And it's like, at least I'm happier than that pathetic bastard who's getting tortured. You know, they kind of have that feeling. It's like the only way they can really feel happy is to like inflict misery on somebody else so that the other person is even more miserable than they are. So that at least relatively speaking, they've got, you know, some relative happiness in comparison with the person that they're pounding on or whatever.
So your first year of life on this planet in human form was spent in Alaska. Your family then relocated, moved to Aberdeen. How did that all unfold? You really well, you grew up to be a bit of a rebel in some ways, I guess. It's sort of a bit of a kind of clean cut, square type, you know, character for the longest time, and very bright, very capable from an academic standpoint. But then I guess maybe what hormones kicked in, and you really developed a wild side, from what I can gather.
Yeah. Well, for starters, my father always taught me to be a free thinker. You know, don't worry about what other people think of you. I mean, you know yourself better than anybody else does. So there was always that. But I was pretty much of a square, kind of a good student, and not getting into trouble much. And then, but like around the age of 13, and like when you're a kid, you just naturally assume that grown-ups have all the answers, and you don't have all the answers because you're just not grown up yet. But when you grow up, then you'll have it all figured out. It's just kind of an assumption that little kids make, you know, that adults actually know what's what. But then around the age of 13, I started getting kind of doubts about that. And by the time I was 16, I just realized that adults don't know what's what any more than I did. And that pretty much triggered a kind of rebellion. So after like my 16th birthday, I pretty much just went feral. And after being an honor student, I almost flunked out of school, like 11th grade. Like I got, in 10th grade, my final report card for second semester was like a 3.93 or something like that. And then my last report card in 11th grade was a 0.80, I think. I got like 3 Fs and 2 Cs. I almost just flunked out of school just because I was just going wild at the time. But then before I got into college, I realized that the real trick is to do your homework before you start partying. So I did pretty well in college, even though I was still partying pretty hard.
Yeah, I saw that that you had included that information as part of your bio. So, marine biology was what came for you next. You picked up a degree in university or college.
Yeah. So I got a degree in marine biology. Mainly just because of the weird, it's like life arose in the sea, so there's all these grotesque, monstrous kind of creatures living out in the ocean, the likes of which you don't find on land. And just that was so fascinating to me that it sold me on becoming a marine biologist when I was younger.
You do much scuba diving?
No, I didn't do any.
That's something that often I've reflected upon as well too, is just the depths, the vast expanse of water that we have, the dark unknown that covers so much of this planet, really. And you know, the story. Hey, hashtag the Kraken. If you want to look at it that way, we also kind of the Kraken for us is also things like Silicon Valley, social media, establishment, dinosaur, you know, like the legacy, big media, big tech, you know, things like that, basically Google. but the Kraken also takes shape in the classic sense too. So Oh, speaking of which, you had a pirate story that you were going to share with us. That's one of the things, it's one of the items that we, in accordance with the ship's articles and the captain's, well, that's what the captain likes to see typically, so that we can welcome guests formally aboard the Robin Hood and sail on out on to the high digital seas here out of Skullport Harbor and the majestic, mystic bay. What do you got up your sleeve? I know you're mentioning you had something in mind as far as maybe pirate lore or history is
Oh
concerned.
yeah, I definitely have a favorite pirate story. It's a very famous one. You've heard it before, but it's the only pirate story I know. In fact, it's the only one I can think of. But it was with regard to pirates in ancient Rome and Julius Caesar being kidnapped by pirates when he was a young man. Because back in the time, the Mediterranean Sea was still infested with certain pirate groups that had like hangouts in the rocks and stuff in certain areas. And one hot spot of pirates when Julius Caesar was young was a place called Kilikia, which is like the coast of what would now be southern Turkey. Like Anatolia, Asia Minor, like the southern coast there. It's really bad for ports. It's all rocky and everything, so it's a good place for pirates to hide, or at least it was. And so Julius Caesar, when he's a young student of rhetoric, he gets captured and essentially kidnapped and held for ransom by these pirates, these Kilikian pirates. And they tell him how much money they're going to ask for ransom, and he just laughs at them and tells them that they could ask for twice that much. So they upped the ransom at his advice to this. I don't even remember how much it was. It was a hell of a lot of money, though, many pounds of silver. And so while he's waiting for his family to ransom him, he's practicing his rhetoric. He's practicing writing speeches and delivering speeches, and he's using the pirates as an audience, which they think is kind of funny. And sometimes he even kind of bosses them around, treats them like servants and so forth. And they're kind of amused by that. And, he's worth a lot of money, so they don't just kill him. And because they were such good sports and like listening to his speeches and everything, he very good-naturedly tells them that after he's released, he's going to come back with some soldiers and have them all crucified. And so they think it's all funny and everything. They think it's a joke, but he's true to his word. After he gets ransomed, he immediately goes and gets some soldiers, maybe some ships, because he had a lot of money even when he was young, and just comes back, and definitely he has them all captured and has them crucified. But because they were such good sports, he showed mercy to them and had their throats all cut before he had them nailed up onto the crosses.
That's right. Yeah, that's it's a very famous story, of course, and well presented. So thank you for that. I'm sure there's a few of our listeners who've have probably heard it, but they
Yeah.
it's a great reminder of you know Caesar was an incredible historical figure, of course. So I know earlier we were discussing sociopaths and psychopaths. In my mind, maybe we both know, of course, a few of our listeners as well too, a little bit of Buddhist theory, I suppose. But and this
Mm-hmm.
is where we find common ground between the major schools of Buddhism, Theravadan, which folks don't ever refer to that as Hinayana. Okay, I don't think you probably don't like to hear that. That kind of gets your sets your hackles. Is that the word? Yeah, a little
Oh,
ear.
I don't know.
It's
I
the
It wouldn't
narrow
bother me
path.
more to be called a Hinayanist than to be called a fascist or a Nazi or whatever. So
It's
it
the
doesn't matter.
it's the narrow path. Yeah, so it's just kind of a little bit, I think, rude and
Yeah,
insensitive.
it's derogatory. It's definitely
Yeah.
derogatory.
So Theravadan, which is the way of the elders, and that, if I'm not mistaken, I do believe that's part of the tradition that you connected with and practiced
Yeah.
essentially for several decades, and still even to this day. back in the States now. Mahayana and then the Vajrayana, we don't have much time to get into all the particulars, but part of the common ground, of course, where regardless of all the differences they may have, that the core similarities reside upon the Four Noble Truths, and the fourth noble truth being the Eightfold Path, of course. So, what is it? Right, not just right attitude, right livelihood, but right views, I think, as well. So we got to be careful with the views and opinions. And this all goes back to what we had brought up earlier, just regarding the business of sociopaths, psychopaths. Power, worldly power, does it not tend, do you not think that it tends to breed psychopathy? People like that in like high, that find themselves high levels of society and politics and so forth, that some real cruelty and insensitivity on their parts, is what it typically seems.
I think the main word would just be ruthlessness, where you just do whatever has to be done in order to get what you want.
That's a good point. And the thing is, power, the word power in French, pouvoir, it just means to be able to. So as George Carlin told us too, let's not forget, power does what it wants. It's get the hell out of the way, basically. We're going to do what we want.
Yeah, and I think that's one reason why some religious systems like Buddhism and early Christianity also just encourage people to just renounce all social status and all worldly power and just renounce all of that kind of stuff, because it has a power of corruption.
Right. Many people, of course, who do believe that what does it matter? There's no consequences to my actions, and if there are, I can maneuver and get around and maybe hire a lawyer, and they can get me off the hook here with this whole business, or I didn't do it. So endless denial, and now, which leads me to want to hit upon the concept of karma, basically, as a cosmic law. And that's, it's an ancient law, of course, and originating in India, presumably many thousands of years ago. So I don't know if now is the time really to get into it, but perhaps you could if you wanted to, just unpack for our listeners what karma just means. Action. I'm pretty sure it was one word.
That's the literal translation of it. Yeah.
Why don't we hear from your perspective of what your thoughts are regarding karma?
Okay. Then? Yeah. Well, I think the original idea of karma arose like in prehistoric times in northwestern India. It was like the Indus Valley civilization. And they just considered karma to be almost like a material substance. It just, like the Jains today, they believe karma is just like a physical substance that's sticky and sticks to your soul and weighs you down. So they're trying to eliminate all their karma so that their spirits can float up into heaven after they die. And the Buddhists, I mean, that was one of the innovations of Buddhism, in that the Buddha interpreted karma as a psychological state. So the official position of Theravada Buddhism, which I assume would be the official position more or less of pretty much all schools of Buddhism, is that karma literally is volition, or cetana. And volition is the usual translation of it, but it might come closer to like what Schopenhauer called will. It's like this urge that drives you through life. And it just kind of runs your life if you're not fully awake, if you're not fully conscious. Sort of a lot of people, they're just kind of like puppets. They're just driven by their habits. And it's that way with pretty much everybody. Like if you open a door, usually you're not thinking You're not like consciously opening the door. It's just this habit. You've opened the same door 10,000 times. So it's just this automatic habit where you do it without thinking. You're thinking about something else, or driving a car, that sort of thing. So karma works kind of that way. It like, to some degree, it just kind of runs your life for you and makes things happen because you're not awake enough to really steer your own ship entirely. So it's it's kind of like Schopenhauer's will. It's just this like the momentum of your mind. It's like habit energy.
So that's why meditation is important, I suppose, in that we are able to still the mind, the monkey mind, as maybe that's part of what the image that you are familiar with in your tradition. I'm not sure, but just for it to rest and to be still rather than to be running off in all sorts of different directions, chasing phantasmic images or impulsive desires,
Yeah.
fears, so forth.
Perceptions.
Yeah.
Getting lost in perceptions.
Right. Okay, hey, let's just, I'm going to put the brakes on things for the moment here so that we can give a shout out to our audience members out there. Once again, nearly 15 people is what we're seeing here via YouTube. We have a handful over on D Live and Facebook as well, too. Be sure to share your comments in the chat area. It is episode number 206 of Pirate Radio Podcasts. We have this week with us our special guest, Paññobhāsa Bhikkhu, someone who spent nearly 30 years in Burma practicing the Dharma, as it is known, in accordance with the Theravadan tradition, the way of the elders. And we've got Jennifer Knight here who's dropped by. Always great to see her. Barbecue Jim. Imanas, who seems to be a bit of a fan and maybe a friend of our guest this week, talking about how the Venerable One has brought him here. He went ahead and subscribed, as Barbecue Jim had mentioned a few minutes prior. So yes, we do have these technical issues cleared up. It's crazy, folks. We've been using the OBS here for a while now, and then suddenly we have, when we flip the switches and hit buttons and knobs, dials, pulleys, and so forth, that it just doesn't want to take off in the way that it typically has. So I'm not sure if that is a Windows 10 issue or not. But Joey Boomer, Jane E. Walker, Gary D. Yes, you can ask questions, Gary D. That is correct, and feel free by all means. I mean, we could even potentially, if you want to call into the show, pirate1radio@gmail.com. That's the way to do it. Captain Sinclair is the guy you're going to want to talk to, of course. So Zane Ivy saying how you guys might find Stephen A. Key's book, The Vikings' Secret Yoga, The Supreme Adventure, interesting. Viking pirates, Viking guards in Byzantium. I've heard of that. That's right. Yeah, it's been pretty well documented from what I understand. Connections with Indian thought, etc. How about that? The transmission of various traditions coming through Viking, who I believe they were brought on as elite guards and protectors in the Byzantium region, Constantinople, perhaps as it was known back in the day. So there we go. Marshall R. as well, too, who looks to be a bit of a, perhaps, practitioner of Buddhism, bringing up the whole business of Gurdjieff, saying that unconscious processes of the mind are necessary for the maintenance of culture. Yeah, and well, that's an interesting point. Then we get into the whole business, which is something I've always found fascinating. Nietzsche talking about how Buddhism is a negation of the will, so on and so forth. Well, at the same time, he was himself a closet Buddhist. I think what it all came down to, though, is because of the agenda that he had to put out, the sort of ideology that he was promoting, that he was not able to openly and freely reveal that to be the case. His interest and respect for Buddhism as it was. So, negation of the will, whatever that's supposed to mean. But there we
I
go.
think he got that from Schopenhauer.
Yeah, he was a student of Schopenhauer's, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was sort of like a successor to Schopenhauer, but he kind of went the opposite direction. Instead of denying the will, he was all in favor of just going with it.
Will to power.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whatever that's supposed to mean exactly. I'm not sure. Not a Nietzsche expert, obviously, but I do know a few things about this business of how he was. He is one of his famous statements: Buddhism is a negation of the will. Yet at the same time, it was for scholars, people that have looked into it and researched things, that they've determined he was a closet Buddhist, actually, and had a high regard for this philosophy. Which leads me to, I guess, what is our next point here, really, that a lot of talk about Buddhism being religion, a form of spirituality. Is it a philosophy? What is it? How are we to pin it down exactly, or what label it, or what category does it fit into? And because we all know how this works. Humans love to categorize things and try to do exactly that, pin them down and keep them in their proper place. So what are your thoughts, just in brief, venerable one?
Well, what Buddhism is depends on the person who's following it. Like originally, according to my understanding, what the Buddha was really going for was just like stripped down radical mysticism. Just like no philosophy at all, hardly. Just a bare minimum of any kind of perceptual framework. And the whole purpose of it was just to get your mind clear so that you could get out of Plato's cave. But that is such an advanced, like a mode of spirituality that is just like too rich for most people's blood. And there's no way that something like that could become a popular religion. So first, like monks that weren't really adepts started taking over and turned it into this really elaborate scholastic philosophy. And then it started becoming like a popular religion. And then most people are just really not all that spiritually inclined. They just want something to worship or something to believe in that makes them feel good. So then you have all the Buddha statue worship and, pagoda worship and all that kind of stuff. So what Buddhism actually is, or even what Theravada Buddhism actually is, really depends on the person who's practicing it, because it can be very different things to different people. But originally it was just like a radical way of becoming enlightened that most people really couldn't follow.
Enlightenment meaning what exactly?
Like the official definition of enlightenment would just be the cessation of suffering and delusion. But another way of looking at it, I mean, it's like two different approaches to Buddhism. I mean, you can use it as a way of eliminating suffering. It's like the Four Noble Truths are based on, suffering and the cause of suffering and the cessation of suffering and the path that leads to the cessation of suffering. So in a way, the cessation of suffering is kind of like the goal, but you don't have the cessation of suffering unless you also have the cessation of delusion. And that's delusion is like thinking what is real isn't real, thinking what isn't real is real, thinking, what is impermanent is permanent, and vice versa, all this kind of thing. So ultimately, enlightenment would be essentially knowledge of ultimate reality. I mean, it's like you're getting out of Plato's cave. You're seeing reality as it is instead of these perceptual constructs that almost everybody's stuck in.
Quite dangerous, though, in accordance with how Plato laid it out in the Republic, of course, because once you do return from after having seen the light, as it were, those who are still chained to the cave's walls regard you as some sort of lunatic or madman.
Yeah, they can, definitely.
To the point even where they want to bring physical harm to you.
Yeah, in some cultures, I mean, like Jesus of Nazareth is way too advanced for his culture, and so he wound up getting killed. Although the Buddha was he was living in a more enlightened culture, I suppose. So he lived to a ripe old age and was highly respected.
And they were both reformers as well, too. It's interesting to note. Really kind of, I think, yeah, quite fascinating. They were major reformers. And one, in fact, I was just talking to the wife about that this morning, just pointing out, the Old Testament and the New. So what was this new business all about? Why was it necessary to bring about some kind of reform? Clearly, there must have been some dissatisfaction amongst the populace of that region that they were looking for a new way of seeing things, that the old ways had run their course. And
yeah,
there
the old
was,
ways had pretty much just degenerated into words and books.
yeah, and that I presumably felt that there was a better, more honest way of approaching things. Now, what of the idea that Christ was himself a Buddhist monk or practitioner of some sort? Mahayana, presumably, is what I would be thinking, given the time frame.
Yeah, I rather doubt it. I think probably Jesus of Nazareth was like what it says in the New Testament, where he was a carpenter's son and started off as a carpenter, and then it wasn't really satisfying him, so he goes off into the wilderness and becomes a disciple of John the Baptist, and eventually takes over the group after John the Baptist gets arrested.
40 days and 40 nights. Yeah, out taking some sort of a. Now I know you're a fan of. Is it Saint John of the Cross? I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he's my favorite Christian.
Nada, nada, nada.
Yeah.
So as you're saying, just with the original, the origins, taking it right back to the way of the elders, the highly just stripped down, mystical approach way of looking at enlightenment and the whole purpose of pursuing a spiritual path. But the Buddha himself, I don't know if it was 40 days and 40 nights, but he had to face off with Mara at ultimately, just as Christ had to face off with Satan. During that time.
It's like an archetype or something, isn't it?
Right. In fact, there have been scholars. I don't know if you've looked into this. And something I need to refresh myself on, but maybe some of our listeners have. The parallels. There's been a book or two written regarding this whole matter. In fact, I gave a copy away to a nun who I met here, who invited me up to a mountain retreat a number of years ago to help, with provide a little Englitainment.
Oh, nice.
English entertainment, of course, to it was a kids camp basically, so it was a couple days, and yeah, left that with her. I wish I could remember the author's name, but there's something like, they discovered these parallels back around the late part of the 19th century as well. Scholars, a few of them came together and pointed out, look, there's around 100 or so of these parables and the sayings of each of these teachers, like the mustard seed, the widow's the widow's the prodigal son, I guess, is another, and the story, not the widow's son, the story of the widow, I guess, who had nothing to give.
Oh yeah, the
uh
widow's mite.
yeah, it's both. So that it shows up in both traditions, and it's interesting how that works. And the 18 missing years, yeah, I would encourage you, because and I'll take you to. How does the expression go? Well, I hate to be so confrontational, but I'll challenge you on this point because I think that there's something to be said for this. In fact, there's a BBC documentary as well too, regarding this whole matter, how Christ was himself, some believe, scholars, to have been a Buddhist monk. When he was confronted after they found him in front of the temple that his parents did during Passover, I guess is what it was, and he was lost for a couple
Yeah,
days.
allegedly.
Right, yeah. And the learned men of Jerusalem, I suppose, who spoke to him at that time were quite taken aback by his abilities, even at that age, 12 years old, and his knowledge of a whole range of different topics. But more than that, when he returned after the 18 missing years, they really were not too happy with the way that he was promoting these so-called foreign teachings. It was very explicit, like the translation, which we've had, you know, given to us now after so many, couple thousand years. It's starting in the Aramaic and maybe, the Koine Greek, and from one to the other and down through just who knows how many translations and renderings. But it still remains that, yes, these foreign teachings was what they were having a problem with, this, what he was promoting. So talking about love and compassion versus the old way of, you know, you've heard it said in the days of old, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. I say unto you, if a man strikes you on the face, you turn the other cheek, basically. Adultery, he was very explicit. It starts in the heart. Just the thought is what he said. And I think that's true in Buddhism too, correct?
Yeah, well, it's like I said earlier, where karma is a mental state. So whether what you do is good or bad does not ultimately depend on your physical actions. It depends on your mental states when you're doing something.
Wow.
So two people can do exactly the same physical action, and one person has done something good and the other person has done something bad, just because one person had good mental states and the other person had bad mental states while they did it.
Wow. See, that's news to me. I'm a lazy practitioner. I must confess, just a lot lazier than what I ought to be. So, but thank you for that clarification. All right. Well, let's see now. Where should we take the conversation from here? We don't have Pirate Larry on board, which is a bit of a disappointment because I'm sure he would have a lot to add to the conversation. He's quite, he's got a little bit of knowledge regarding various spiritual traditions, and the Dharma, I think, is one example. But let's see what we got here. Now, St. John of the Cross, and something that came to mind here was this business of Meister Eckhart. Have you heard of him? Did you ever look into his history?
I've read a little bit about Meister Eckhart, but I haven't read nearly as much of his stuff as St. John of the Cross, although they were similar with regard to just radical mysticism.
I'm sorry.
So like St. John of the Cross, going with Buddhist terminology, would be considered a master of fourth jhana. He would be like a meditation master. And I think Meister Eckhart was the same.
Yeah. What happened to
So,
it was
so
was
they would have made great Buddhists.
Yeah, yeah. Was Meister Eckhart, was he persecuted, and was he you know, the word heretic, all it means is to choose, right?
I'm not sure what the etymology would
Yeah.
be.
Well, well, if I'm wrong, just you can set me straight at some future point down the road. But yeah, it's hetesis, it's Greek, and it just
Uh-huh.
means to choose, to select. And I heard you talk, one of your conversations, great talks that you had with Brian Rue, who, if people have not seen Brian's archive material, by all means, check out what he has archived over on BitChute. You guys have even got a playlist that is kind of a little bit wonky right now. It's not really operating the way it should be, but I nonetheless did manage to download probably about 50 odd videos, and I should bring up the playlist that I've made here for myself on this end. But you were talking about medieval times and how people back in that day and age, like, they did not even have you could not choose any other way of life, or you would be in big trouble. You were a
Yeah,
heretic.
yeah. And there are some motions in that direction nowadays too, unfortunately.
Well, okay, and by that, what are you driving at exactly?
Well, I mean, nowadays it's if you don't follow the politically correct narrative, then you're a fascist and someone to be opposed and preferably silenced. So, I
Right.
mean, there's always some of that to some degree. I mean, people are just kind of that way. We're sort of like a herd animal, and we want everybody to have the same beliefs as us. Because if somebody else doesn't believe the same as us, then it kind of casts our own beliefs into doubt and threatens them a little bit. So people don't like that. It's probably been the way it's always been to some degree.
Yeah, point taken. So I that's true. There's something deeply profound regarding that whole business, and I can easily see how one could put together either like a dissertation or a really great public talk focusing simply on that theme and topic in particular. Uh, as pirates, of course, we try to be, most of the folks that we seem to have on board here as part of the crew are classic liberals. Um,
Yeah.
and that it's kind of, what can you do, man? Like, let live and let live. What's it's crazy to, although I can see there is a downside to that as well too, with Islam, for example, as it is that they're all about freedom and human rights, and having their liberties, right up to the point until they become the majority in a particular region. Then
Yeah.
it's time to bring in Sharia.
Yeah. Once the population reaches a critical mass, then they tend to be that way.
Right. So, and that is one of the areas we're hoping to get into here. I'm just looking at the time, actually. We're not quite an hour so far. So, but, and I'm not sure if there's anything you had in mind, in addition to, the Buddhist theory, karma and various other talking points. Of course, the three marks of existence I find very fascinating. I think that's pretty simple for people to understand. And you know, in Korea, what we have here, it's Seng Ro Pyong Sa. Seng being birth, Ro getting older, changing, getting older from where you are originally, from a baby up until the time, however long your life goes on. Pyong, as in pain, Apuda, Pyong, Pyongwon being hospital. So, and Sa being death. That's 4. in Chinese
Yeah.
too, right? So
Yeah, in Pali, it's like the standard. It's like birth, aging, sickness, and death.
yeah. And people talk, oh, they say, well, Buddhism superstitious. I say, okay, fine. Well, there is that part if you want to look at it that way. With I guess all the Brian likes to get into the whole business of the realm of the divas and so on and so forth. But you look at things like birth, aging, sickness, and death. That those are indisputable. I mean, it's very scientific. So, on top of that, though, you have the three marks of existence, which now that you might refer to them a little differently from what I recall, but what are they now? We have change,
Impermanence.
change, impermanence, no soul, Atman, I believe.
Yeah, that's the third one.
And dukkha, I guess, to suffering, correct?
Yeah.
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 So
Or I usually translate dukkha as unease.
yeah.
Suffering is, I mean, there's no exact English word that's an exact translation for dukkha. Because dukkha, I mean, it can just mean just that really slight discomfort that you feel that hardly even reaches consciousness, so that you kind of shift position when you're sitting in your chair or whatever. I mean, even that would qualify as dukkha. All the way up to just unbearable agony. It's just like this, even just like the slightest feeling of angst or nervousness or discomfort, anything like that, also is sort of like a baseline dukkha that's just chronic. So
Right,
yeah,
right.
that's a profound one right there.
Yeah, and the speaking of profound, the best analogy or illustration really that I've come across regarding dukkha, it was a Dharma talk back in the day, and I'm not sure who it was that was laying it out there, but they talked about how dukkha was comparable or analogous to a wheel, like I think he said like a stone wheel of just an old wheel of some kind that's rolling along, and it's kind of wobbly. It's not really, it's having problems. It's not rolling along as perfectly as it could, unfortunately. So that's what we're left to work with. Have you ever heard that analogy,
No, I
illustration?
can't remember hearing it referred to as a wheel. It could be in the text somewhere. There's lots and lots of
Yeah,
texts. But,
yeah. So, and what is the? Oh boy, I tell you, there's so many beautiful illustrations of the Dharma. The one regarding the hidden kingdom, the hidden, yeah, geez, I hope you know this one. But
like the ancient ruins, you mean?
the seeker, yeah, they come across it's like the Dharma being comparative to these ancient ruins that once, I guess, were just a splendorous a palace of gold and so
Yeah.
forth. Do you know that one?
Yeah, I think the main point of that is that the Buddha doesn't discover anything new, that he's just rediscovering what people have known for, ages and ages, and then it gets forgotten, and then somebody comes along who rediscovers it, and that's the Buddha.
Yeah.
So
Well,
he was discovering like an ancient city that had already been built by other people, but then had been forgotten, and then he's just refinding it.
oh, that's so cool, really. Yeah, this is
Yeah.
that's
So
so
he
profound.
didn't like cook up, it's like, according to the Buddhists, the Buddha himself didn't invent anything. He didn't create anything new. It's just he's like rediscovering these eternal truths that get forgotten every once in a while.
Yeah, trying to boil things down in their uh, in the simplest sense of what the hell is going on here. Why are we here? Where are we going? Where have we come from? Kind of deal. And what is the
Yeah.
yeah? So, uh, it's this business of rediscovering what has been lost. Well, first of all, Mahavira, he was the founder of Jainism, was he not?
According to the Jains, he was just like the most recent reformer, or like um, Yeah, I'm not sure how to explain. I mean, according to the Jains, he's like the seventh in a series of like enlightened Jain masters, but he was like the last one. Sort of like the Muslims consider Muhammad to be the last prophet, even though there have been prophets before that. So yeah, so he's considered to be the founder of Jainism. Yeah, but the Jains themselves don't consider him to be the real original founder.
Isn't it interesting too? You mentioned the word prophet. How, how is that spelled? Prophet.
Phet.
But there's
Yeah.
also another prophet, Profit. And how often
Yeah.
is it that we find prophets that they seem to affect some people's profits, their bottom line? And, that's what often leads to getting them in trouble, ending up in hot water, as it were.
Yeah.
So that's kind of it's irony or maybe a coincidence, but also traitor. How do we spell traitor? There's two ways, folks, right? You got Trader, trader, someone who's, I guess, doing business with foreign outside entities and parties. But then you can also spell it Traitor, traitor, someone who has betrayed you and perhaps your community. So is that just a coincidence? I would say not, actually. That there's some. I love language, as I think you yourself do, and many of our listeners. So this wordplay is just endless. But
Yeah.
going back to Mahavira, isn't it something, the parallels between his life and that of Siddhartha or
Yeah,
Sakyamuni?
personally, I think the Jains plagiarized the story of the Buddha.
Really? How
I
about
think so
that?
because the Jains were such radical ascetics that they didn't have many scholars. I mean, the Jains were such radicals that a lot of them would just wander around naked and they wouldn't even own a begging bowl. I mean, they just begged with their bare hands. And so their scriptures went completely extinct like twice. So they had to come up with a new set of scriptures two different times. And I think with regard to the story of Mahavira, it's very similar. He's like the Kshatriya prince, and he renounces the world. And instead of cutting his hair, he pulls it out by the roots because that's how the Jains are supposed to do it. But aside from that, the stories of the two men are very, very similar. So much so that it's pretty fishy. So that either one group plagiarized the other group, or maybe both of them were just going with an even older story. But being a Buddhist, I would be inclined to think that the Jains probably borrowed that story from the Buddhists, the Jains from the Buddhists. Yeah.
Well, that's something, because I had always understood uh, it to be that the Jains were actually the older, that they preceded Buddhism, not
Yeah, well,
the other way
Mahavira was
around.
like an older contemporary of the Buddha. But like I said, they lost their scriptures twice. So they had to sort of come up with a new set of scriptures two different times.
How about that? All right. So, oh yes, and I know, leading back to the hidden, what was lost in the forest, in the jungles, this ancient palace, and the ancient ruins, and rediscovered, occulted, you could even say that word, meaning simply hidden. That
Hmm.
we actually saw that manifest, and this is one of the reasons why I do believe we're living through the age of apocalypse. Um, eh, the term itself, on one level, meaning simply to uncover, and that for their for light to be shone on what has for so long been hidden. Uh, but in the northern area reaches of India, these ancient Buddhist ruins were, in fact, themselves lost for nearly 1,000 years, as I recall, only to be rediscovered by British engineers, surveyors, and the like during the time of British Empire occupation, one might even say, of course,
Yeah.
of India in the late mid. I think it was the mid 19th century, as a matter of fact, and they had no idea what was going on to begin with, did they?
Um, not much of an idea. I mean, I've read that like Indian history was invented by the British. Just they just kind of had to cook it all up on their own. They
The
just had to start from
Aryans,
scratch, pretty
yeah,
much.
with that Aryan business is very contentious, is it not?
Um,
The invasion.
yeah, it seems fairly straightforward to me, although there's lots of different people with lots of different beliefs. You know, it's like some people just have an emotional sort of a vested interest. Like a lot of Indians just want to believe that the Aryan race arose aboriginally in India itself. It's partly like national pride or something, I think, although the evidence it's fairly straightforward. I think it shouldn't be too controversial that the Aryan race arose like somewhere in the neighborhood of the Black Sea.
It's interesting to look at northern India itself, Pakistan and so forth, Afghanistan, more than, there's their fair share of redheaded people, blue eyes, and so
Yeah.
forth, a very light complexion.
Hmm.
Right. So, I mean, we are, most of us, hopefully, that have studied history from that period know the story of Alexander the Great. I actually had no idea until witnessing the Buddhas, the Bamiyan Buddhas, being blown up by the Taliban, that Buddhism had itself made its way so far, abroad, basically, from out of northern India all the way into the furthest reaches of Afghanistan. That's some pretty profound stuff right there. So
Yeah, well, I think a lot of Central Asia was Buddhist before the Muslims came, and that's how it got to China. By the way, was through like Bactria or Afghanistan, and then up through Central Asia, and then east into China.
the good old Silk Road uh, connection, and that history there of who knows how many years, something which even to this day it continues, of course, something that I am constantly reminded of, and having anytime the Silk Roads do enter into conversation, is this business of how in Korea we've got the Shilla dynasty, is what it's known as, which goes back to, oh, let's say maybe the 8th century, something in that area, 8th, 9th century. And all the way over in Afghanistan, we find almost an exact same replica of the royal, the crown of Sheila, as to what was discovered in Afghanistan. So you could say that's just a coincidence, but there are a fair number of researchers, scholars, and so forth who have claimed that the Silk Roads themselves led all the way over down through China to Korea and over to Japan, actually. Whether by well, you could, the sea route, of course, too, was quite uh, active for God only knows how long. You probably don't know the story, but there's something that's known as the Gaia Kingdom. We've all heard of Bodh Gaya, of course, and for me, that's immediately has me thinking, might there be a connection? Look a little further into things. The founding king, Kim Sudowang, who did he marry, supposedly? An Indian princess. So
Oh,
from
nice.
the Ayodhya region, you know where Ayodhya is, up in northwest
Yeah, I
India.
passed through there once, a long time
Yeah.
ago.
So, I mean, Gaia, the kingdom of Gaia, the marriage with the Indian princess, and doesn't Ayodhya, in making your way, I'm not sure if you have to it'd be through the Ganges or some other river system. But I really do think I'm kind of a rogue heretical thinker, in the sense that I do believe Buddhism actually made its way into Korea earlier than what most scholars, the consensus view of reality is the 3rd century, 4th century, something along those lines, through through whatever part of China the monks were said to be carrying the scrolls. I think that this princess had a hand because of, if this marriage in fact occurred, the trade, not just commerce and so forth, but also culture and various ideas. So the naming of the kingdom is Gaia, and then something. Have you heard of Prince Shotoku from out of Japan?
Name sounds familiar.
Yeah. Well, there's something really exceptional that's taking place there as well too. Their clan was the Soka clan, and the name for Buddha here in Korea is Soka or Sokyamuni. They were sent on the run, actually. His family, through several generations, they were driven out of Korea on several occasions, had to relocate from one area to the next, and finally, the 3rd time that they were told to get lost, basically, they made their way down and around all the way over to Japan, where Prince Shotoku arrived on the scene and helped to spread Buddhism basically throughout a large part of the country, because up until that point, as with Korea, I think what the main religion that was in place was something like shamanism, basically, was it not? Something. What's your knowledge of that whole business?
With regard to Korea or Japan?
Or both, really.
Well, I mean, the original religious belief of the Japanese was probably something along the lines of Shinto,
right?
Which would be kind of Asian paganism, maybe some ancestor worship thrown in. The deification of the emperor and all that. I'm not so sure about Korea. I'm less familiar with Korean history than Japanese history.
Exactly. So there we go. All right. Well, once again, thanks to. We've got a lot of people here in the comments section. You guys can't see it. That's the second computer here. Zane Ivy asking, so you think the Sioux family in Korea is a remnant of the Sakya clan? Sioux. Well, I really don't know about that one myself. But yeah, Prince Shotoku and Soka or Sokya.
Yeah.
The clan.
Well, the Shakya clan got pretty much exterminated shortly after the Buddha's time, so it would have happened pretty early.
Well, there's some connection though. Once again, because you see a lot of. I don't know who you think the Buddha actually was, but there's a lot of speculation he was a Scythian prince.
Yeah, it's possible that like Shakya and Scythia or Scythia are related etymologically. Also, there was a group of like a Indo-Persian tribe called the Sakas that invaded India long after the Buddha's time. But I have considered it possible that the Buddha himself may not have been like a Vedic Indian, but was like from an earlier wave of, like related to the Scythians, like more of a Persian-speaking branch of the Indo-Persians that invaded earlier, and then and that could help to explain why he wasn't just following Vedic culture, how he was kind of an outsider and saw Vedic culture sort of from the outside. He was like on the frontier of the Brahmanistic culture. So it is possible, although I don't know if there would be any way of proving it.
Exactly. Marshall R. here saying, is that all? Keep talking. How about the blueness of the Buddha's eyes? I know about I know that there are alternate translations, but well, here's something you just reminded me. Uh, I don't know if you yourself are aware of this Banti. How do you pronounce this? Banti or Bante?
Bonte.
Bante. Thank you. And that's considered sufficient. It's not like rude or anything.
No, that's polite.
That's okay. Bante.
Yeah.
So, but Bodhidharma, check this out. The straight out of the Chinese texts themselves, the Chinese history books, they refer to him as what? The blue-eyed barbarian.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but it's hilarious. I just look at that and laugh,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, he was a Brahmin, so he was like a high caste, probably had a lot of Indo-Aryan blood in him.
They call him, his name here in Korea is Dharma. They call him Dharma. So, and they also, they know the word for Scythian is Skitai here in Korea, Skitai. So, can you say a little bit more though about Bodhidharma, just in brief, and then we've got a maybe 15, 20 minutes tops where we can talk about current events, your thoughts on current events, and social justice warrior business, which I know you're not overly keen on, cultural Marxism and the like, which you're quite, you feel no reluctance to discuss, as far as I understand.
Yeah.
And which was something that I was just going to ask you when we get to it. We'll save it for just a few minutes here, but if how that squares basically with the precepts, basically, if there's any violation of the precepts in having just your own personal views, which don't necessarily find themselves in line with the majority. So, but yeah, Bodhidharma. Could we just hear a little bit more, if you know much that you can offer as far as his because you were saying he's a Brahmin, so he came out of India then?
Yeah, he did come from India, from the West. That's like one of the most famous Zen koans is, why did Bodhidharma come to China from the West?
Gandhara?
No, why did Bodhidharma come from the West, which was like central India, I think. That's where it came from.
Not Gandhara.
No, that would be like Pakistan.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
And of course of what is it, Naropa, Nalanda. Nalanda was the famous university, was it not?
Yeah, that was a major university city in northern India.
That's where the Tibetans...
in ancient and medieval times.
Pardon me?
In ancient and medieval times, until the Muslims came in and sacked it.
Yeah, great job. Well done, Islam. So, yeah, there's a lot of, I think, Burmese monks who are not too keen, because I think there's some problems with Myanmar right now, if I'm not mistaken, various regions where they want Islam making inroads, and they know where it could all ultimately lead. So unfortunately, there's been some bloodshed, and I feel for the Muslims too, because a lot of them, I would imagine, are pretty gentle and easygoing, but once that Sharia business kicks in, hell breaks loose. So I don't know if you want to touch on that in brief, or just to shift the focus to current events, the election in the USA, whichever you feel more keen on addressing.
Well, might as well. I mean, the current events in Burma are, I don't know if it's really current now. I'm not exactly sure what the situation is now, but there was a Muslim group called the Rohingyas that they were brought into Burma from what is now, what's the name of the country? Bangladesh, by the British. They were clearing the Irrawaddy Delta. They were clearing lots of land and starting to plant rice, and so they brought in these Rohingyas to be agriculturalists on this newly cleared land. And so the Burmese really never considered the Rohingyas to be Burmese citizens. They they were just brought here by the British colonialists, and they were never really welcomed by the Burmese themselves, never really considered to be Burmese citizens or anything like that. And then there started being problems. We were talking about the critical mass earlier. When Muslims are relatively sparse, they tend to be peaceful and good neighbors and that sort of thing. But when they get up to a certain density, then they start not seeing much point in being polite to followers of other religions, sort of thing. And so there started being friction and troubles, and nice Burmese Buddhist girl gets raped or something, and then it causes reprisals. And so the Burmese military government, they were it's kind of like a mafia thing where the mafia, they're bad guys, but they're good Catholics. So it's like the Burmese military government, they were sort of like the mafia, but they were still relatively devout Buddhists, even though they didn't really follow Buddhism very well. At least they were sort of supporters of it. And so they didn't want Burma taken over by Muslims. They didn't want it to be overrun. They have really like a deep national pride, and they consider Buddhism or Dhamma to be like their national treasure and all this. So they didn't want to see it get like diluted down or disrespected or whatever. And so eventually the army just drove most of the Rohingyas out of the country. They're like in refugee camps in Bangladesh now. And from the Burmese Buddhist point of view, the problem was pretty much solved. It was like most of the Rohingyas were just gone. But then you had like the NGOs and like the United Nations and everything who are so keen on political correctness, and they don't like Islamophobia or anything. And also they just jumped at the opportunity to point out that it was Buddhists who were acting ruthlessly in this case, at least half the time. So they don't want everyone to think that only Muslims can be like violent or something. So they jumped at that. But then they started like pressuring the Burmese government to bring the Rohingyas back, which I think most of the Rohingyas don't even want to come back at this point. So that's pretty much the last I heard of the situation was they'd pretty much all been driven out, and now it's like the international politically correct community is trying to get them to move back in again, but they don't want to come back.
Well, that's probably for the best. Although you would hope that they would have a place to settle in and to relocate, to call home.
Yeah. You'd think that all these countries demanding that the Rohingyas should be given a home should just take them into their own countries, but it's sort of NIMBYism, it's like not in my backyard.
Exactly. Yeah. Israel's pretty good for on that front, the hypocrisy. Not overly. I'm not sure how they don't really promote or embrace multiculturalism. Maybe they do to a certain extent, but not on the scale that we have in the West. We have it, just crammed or jammed or rammed, I guess is the word I'm looking for, down our throats. So it's to the point where, in conjunction with the Kalergi plan, there was something else.
Yeah.
Maybe you guys were talking. You and Brian were talking about this. Not the Kalergi plan, but some other scheme that the New World Order crowd has in place, and they've been pursuing as far as Western disruption, upheaval, ultimately chaos. It's all order out of chaos is their modus operandi as well too. Let's not forget, really. That's what's
Yeah, I think the globalists will resort to chaos only when just sheep-like obedience doesn't work. If they can just go with indoctrinating people until they're like the New World or the Brave New World, where everybody's just kind of spineless and obedient, then they'd be quite happy to go that route.
That's a great point.
Yeah, but if people start resisting, then it's time for the chaos.
Time for the stick. Or it's no more bread and circuses. So yeah, amusing ourselves to death. That's a great point though, bringing up Huxley's Brave New World. A lot of talk about Orwell's 1984.
Yeah.
Where are we at?
Yeah.
What's the future going to look like as far as the dystopian, state of the world is concerned? Now with COVID, of course, we've seen that enter into the picture, and I'm not sure where you stand on the whole issue, but myself personally, hashtag COVID 1984, hashtag Fauci virus, hashtag Harvard virus. Maybe we can get into more of this in the after show if you have time or interest in sticking around. But the comment section here has been pretty crazy. And this could lead into the business of maybe your just thoughts on the recent election and where things, speaking of chaos, stand at the moment. Does Paññobhāsa think the U.S. will fracture like Yugoslavia, Soviet Union, into separate sovereign entities, like a balkanization, I guess is what he's asking here, Gary D. What are your thoughts, venerable?
Well, I think this fiasco of an election may have taken America like one step closer to civil war, but still, I'm going with my original prophecy that real civil war is still more likely in Europe than in America. So I think it would take a hell of a lot more than we've got going now to really cause America to balkanize. But I think I could see civil war going on in Europe before it happens in America. But I could be wrong.
As far as solutions are concerned, what if there were a major third political party was to emerge and enter into the picture on the national level? Wouldn't that help to diffuse the radical polarity of things, as far as you're either one of us or you're one of them kind of deal? You know what I mean? So and you got the two sides going at each other's throats all too often, unfortunately. But a third political part, would that be something of a solution?
It's possible. It would depend on what the parties were like, though, I think. Because I have considered, it's like if the left just goes so insane that even the normies start waking up, and they are kind of, then you might have something like, the Democratic Party splits apart with like the neo-Marxists as one party, and then maybe like the globalist neocons and the relatively sane half of the Democratic Party kind of coalesce to form a new group. And then you've got like the right-wing nationalists, the descendants of the Trump Republicans could form another party. But how well that would work in America, I can't really say. It's you'd have to have like a coalition of two parties ganging up against one, which would then still be kind of a two-party system.
Speaking of Trump and the election and so forth, where do you think this recount business is going to lead? Is it going to, I mean, things are not looking good as far as him managing to hold office and to serve a second term as president. You've got big media, clearly they're kind of jumping the gun in.
The entire globalist establishment has been 100% against him just from the very get-go. So yeah, that's easily predictable. In fact, Trump himself predicted that this was going to happen, and it did.
And then you've got Democrats, I mean, who are counting the votes, which in all too many instances, that's one of the big issues here, where it's so just ridiculously partisan that what did Joseph Stalin tell us, folks? That you can have all the democracy, all the voting you want, just so long as I get to count the votes. And that's exactly what we're seeing played out right now. The same
thing happened 2 years ago here in California. It was I go to bed and the Republicans are winning in these key districts, and then I wake up the next morning and they're losing. It's because all these votes get found sometime in the middle of the night, and that was sort of practice for the big one this year. So, yeah, it doesn't really surprise me. It kind of surprised me when I woke up in the morning and Trump's lead had evaporated, but still, I mean, it wasn't like a major surprise because I'd already seen that in miniature just in the state of California in the midterm election.
Reverend Jim, do you want to jump in here just briefly and add a few words, just a comment or two? We got to wrap up actually, and potentially head off to the after show. But I know you've got probably like Pennsylvania, Michigan. I mean, how many states were there that were initially? It was looking like Trump was. I mean, geez, which was it? Pennsylvania, where he was ahead by 700,000 votes,
Yeah,
and then
they all disappeared.
Oh, jeez,
Yeah.
oh God, it's like how obvious do they want to make it? It's like this is
that's
highway robbery.
Bizarre thing to me. The bizarre thing to me is they're not even really trying to hide it anymore. It's just that Democrats want to believe that their side are the good guys so desperately that deep down they're just kind of willing to close their eyes to just fraud and deception. It's the way it seems to me. It's just astonishing that Joe Biden could even be elected president. I mean, he's like this corrupt, senile old Gilligan, I mean, he doesn't even know where he is half the time. And he's going to be elected the president of the United States, the most powerful man in the world. It's just bizarre to me. But then again, I mean, he's not really going to be president. You're going to have these, corporate billionaires that own him that are really running the show.
Yeah, which was the case I would say to a large extent with Trump's administration, was it not?
To some degree, but the reason why they hated his guts so desperately was simply because he was not, one of the corporate establishment or the globalist establishment.
He's lost $1 billion. Do you know that? He's lost over $1 billion with his empire, I guess, his financial empire already.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me.
So things are not looking good, but he's not going to go without a fight, and I don't blame him, frankly. He has every right, him and his supporters, and just for the sake of doing what they can to uphold the integrity of the election and the transparency as well too, where when you've got people in these balloting centers where the votes are being counted and they're blocking the windows.
Yeah.
Like that's about as anti-transparent as I could probably, most of us start to imagine.
That's just the icing on the cake. I mean, it was like, even on election night, they took special care to keep Biden ahead with regard to the electoral votes. Because, I mean, even when there were hardly any ballots counted yet, they're already calling states for Biden, whereas Trump could have more than 90% of the vote and have a substantial lead, and they still wouldn't call him just because they wanted it to look like Biden was always in the lead. And then even before that, I mean, you've got Twitter literally censoring the president of the United States. It's like the entire corporate globalist establishment is just out to get Trump. And even Fox News came out with the knife, on election night. It was like, it reminded me of Julius Caesar. I've written a few articles just comparing Trump to Julius Caesar, how they're kind of, they kind of have parallel lives to some degree. And it was like, fortunately for Trump, he didn't get literally assassinated. It was just all these different powerful players just pulled the knives out just to make sure that he wouldn't win. And they may succeed. Although, just looking at history, you see how well that worked for the Roman Republic. Killing off Caesar didn't work so well in the long run for them.
Yeah, all the assassins right after they headed for the hills, didn't they? They couldn't get out of Dodge any faster. So
Yeah.
we'll see. We'll see how this all washes out in the end. But this QAnon phenomenon is really quite something. I don't know where you stand on that whole business, but Pedogate as well too, which so many people they like to hashtag Pizzagate, but really I think there's a wider phenomenon at play, unfortunately, that really has played and had a significant impact on the state of politics, not just in the U.S. but right around the world, where they use certain forms of sexual blackmail, and especially where they can manage it, set it up with children or just underage, minors,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So, and Trump was doing a lot in the way of human trafficking. He was taking, there was steps, legislation with respect to pursuing human trafficking, cracking down on it. So many of the appointments that he had, that he was trying to make, were being blocked by the Democrats, I guess, as well. And let's not forget, Pelosi, she did all she could. She was very successful in shutting down the stimulus package. So Merry Christmas, America. I don't know if that's good. How long it's going to be until people out there suffering are going to receive their stimulus. But
Kathy,
yeah,
you brought up the QAnon thing. If any of what they're saying is right, all the ballots, the legal ballots, have some type of secret watermark
right,
on them, according
right.
to Q.
Well,
And
good luck. Let's hope that's the
all
case.
the fake ones are going to be brought in, and exposed as being fake.
Let's hope that happens. That's right. That came about through the Department of Homeland Security just this past year. They set that system up kind of quietly, so that that's critical to uphold the integrity of the election, so that every legitimate vote is counted, not all these fake ballots, and also that you got to wonder about the number of votes that are being discarded as well too, abandoned or destroyed. There's an example that came out of Arizona just recently where they told voters to go in and use like these felt markers, which ultimately led to their ballot being discarded because it bled through on the other side apparently, and so the story goes. And this is in the main county of in Arizona, in Phoenix, I guess, the really central hub there, which really it's so much hinges on as far as the state itself is concerned. Does anyone know the name? Mara something?
Maricopa, I think, something like that.
Yeah. So there's countless examples. There were pipes that were burst just right on cue. In Georgia, I guess it would be Atlanta, the main holding center with all the ballots, the largest in the entire state, largest amount of ballots being held there in the entire state of Georgia. Not to worry though, mainstream media was telling us none of the votes were destroyed or damaged. Not a problem. So just that's their story, I guess, and that's what they expect us to believe. But just endless chicanery. So which is to be expected. That's the way these people operate. And what more can you really say?
They didn't really have to do it up until Trump, because I mean, before Trump, it was voting for president of the United States was just like choosing between Coke and Pepsi. I mean, both parties were globalists. I mean, they were both working for the same New World Order agenda, just by slightly different routes. But I mean, like the corporate billionaires donated to both sides just so they'd have strings attached no matter who won. And so it wasn't until Trump recently. I mean, probably in the past there have been similar situations, but Trump just wasn't part of this globalist establishment. So they didn't cheat hard enough the first time to get rid of him, and they regretted it. So they made sure that they cheated good and hard this time.
He didn't need their money. I guess that's one of the points to keep in mind. I think what sort of you're alluding to there. But anyways, look, we have got. Well, we're pretty much up against the wall here as far as time is concerned, and the comment section has been on fire. I wish that we could address everything that people have to say here. A lot of great points being made, and Daniel Santana, one of your comments actually was being withheld. We let that we gave that the green light. And it's interesting, speaking of censorship and so forth. Geez, I hope it's still there. There is a compilation of Biden harassing little girls. The banned video of Biden. That YouTube continues to delete. Well, guess what, Daniel? Your comment, just exactly what I just read to you there. There's a compilation of Biden harassing little girls. The banned video of Biden. That YouTube continues to delete. Your comment was set aside for moderation automatically by YouTube. So go figure. It's pretty, I hate to, well, it's disgusting, frankly, if you really want to take it to the extreme. I don't like to do that, but on occasion, unfortunately, strong words are necessary to convey the level of just disdain. What am I looking for here exactly? Disappointment, incredulity.
Yeah.
So. But anyways.
Although, I mean, really, it's always been this way. I mean, the world has always been crazy and messed up. It's just always been this way. It's just more obvious now, partly just because, the cockroaches have just come out in broad daylight now. But it's always been this way.
Great point. And that leads us right back to this whole business of the Buddha and his path, his teachings, what Christ referred to as his yoke, his way. Follow that. My way is light. My way is easy.
Yeah. Yoke and yoga have the same etymology.
There you go. That's right. So, and thanks to Alan Watts for pointing that out. Although I think I already understood that almost intuitively, because I mean, the way that words just simply are, the parallels, the connections, dots that can be connected. But inner space and outer space. This is the last point I'd like to make, and we're gonna call it a night. And that all of the chaos that we see out in the world, really in the Buddhist way of looking at things, our being here, nodes in the matrix, as it were, each of us, that it's all an illusion ultimately. It's all to be compared to a dream. I think that's in line with the Theravadan teachings, is it not?
Yeah, not nearly so much as in Mahayana, but it's definitely there. Yeah, I mean, it's all flickering shadows on the walls of Plato's cave.
How about that? So, and not to get too caught up in the outside world, frankly. Don't get too drawn in or sucked in and find yourself getting all carried away and losing sleep at night, stressed out, when really it's just it's not the outer space that we should be so much concerned about as the inner world. Is that not, would you not concur with that, Bante?
Yeah, well, the mind is number one. I mean, that's the most important thing is your mind and your mental states.
Right.
And you can be happy with zero money and zero friends and empty belly and all that, and that's what monks do. But so it's really if you've got the right kind of mental states, then Yeah, just maintain equanimity and stay mindful and surf the waves.
Samsara is nirvana. Nirvana is samsara. So Brian Rue dropping into the conversation here in the chat end of things. So just a big shout out to Brian, of course. And we would encourage everyone to check out his videos over on BitChute. Pretty easy to find. You can also find him over on Minds, along with yourself, politically incorrect Dharma, I believe. We got all the links down here in the comments section via YouTube. So, anything more? Now, you've got money is a touchy thing for you, no pun intended, but you've got a Subscribe Star in place here. I think is one of the. Oh, we forgot to get your links up in the. That's one. We messed up. We'll get them up there. We have them on the calendar. If people drop by WPRPN.com and go to the drop-down menu area that we have in place, just click on November, and you'll be able to see. You'll be able to see our guests' links. We'll add them to the YouTube after the show. Our apologies that small, actually rather large oversight, but I tell you, the work that goes into putting these shows together, people that have never done, a live stream,
no worries.
Yeah, there we go. We'll have it up there shortly for you, though. So why don't you let people know how they can best contact you? I guess minds.com, politically incorrect Dharma, and what else would we be looking at there?
They could look at my channel on Subscribestar also, and on my blog is my. Is it on my blog? My blog or my old website has my email address in case anybody wanted to contact me personally.
Right. And we are going to pledge actually a little bit in the way of dana, donation. I think there's an etymological.
Yeah, I think there is.
That connection there to those two words. But a little bit of karmic love coming both your way as well as Brian's here in conjunction with our Operation Secret Santa campaign. We're going to thank everyone once again here. Head off to the after show, trying to track down this November link. Our browser doesn't want to bring it up immediately here. Oh, here we go. Now we've got it. So, but yeah, we're going to head off to the after show. Whether you're able to stick around or not, have the interest or energy, it's up to you. Maybe we could, in fact, invite Brian into the Skype if he's around. He might like to be a part of things. It lasts for an hour. It's completely optional, and we'll just have a quick chat behind the scenes here and see where things stand, rather than putting you too much on the spot. So
no, it's cool with me. I can do it.
Okay, well that's really appreciated, and we look forward to it. Anything, Reverend Jim, that we're missing out on here that you think we could perhaps? We're going to connect with Jim in the. Got this media player here, which is not exactly working the way that we like it to, but let's see. We're going to connect with Jim up in the crow's nest there once again. How are things looking, Reverend Jim?
Things are looking good. I've been having some slight tech issues as of late also, which I can't quite figure out as to why, but working around them. They're just a pain in the butt. Yeah, I'm gonna take off. It was a great show, some interesting things, and I still probably don't know any more about Buddhism than I did at the beginning.
Oh but, no!
Well, I do. I know more, but it's probably more questions than answers. But that's probably a good thing.
That's okay. Yeah.
That leads to research and trying to figure things out.
Yeah, it's better to be sincerely stumped than to think that you know something when you don't know it.
Oh well, like I've said before, if you find yourself to be the smartest man in the room, you're in the wrong room. Because you're not going to learn anything if you're the smartest man there. You must seek. wiser people to learn from. So
Good idea.
I'll talk to you later. Have a great weekend, and God bless you all.
Okay, you too, Jim. Thank you. So we'll just get everybody to mute out on this end while we cue up the outro. Big thanks once again to the likes of Zane Ivy, Brian Rue, Kiwi Bear News with Musa. We had close to 20 people altogether this go round. Not quite, who joined us in the live stream via YouTube. There were 7 over on. In fact, you know what we're going to do here at the tail end? We're going to open up our little treasure chest just to let people know that well, maybe we can't do it right now. I think they're going to block us. So, no, it's not going to happen today, folks. We would have liked to, but seems to be some issues on that front. So, yeah, nearly 7 on D Live, and I'm not sure what was happening on Facebook. We're going to have to continue to work on that. We just recently reestablished this multi-platform streaming ability. So, we're learning new things every day. They took it away from us, and we had this little workaround gifted to us recently, and have been doing our best to make the most of things since that point. Marshall R. Hey, yeah, Meta all. That's right. Indeed. So, Daniel Santana, thank you, Daniel, once again for your support via Patreon and your donation to PayPal recently. Really means a lot to us. Hope to see you around a little more, of course. Joey Boomer. Who else are we missing out on here? I don't think there are too many women this go around other than Jennifer Knight right off the top. And she maybe seems to have, she either checked out or fell asleep. So, but I tell you that the comment section was definitely on fire. We'll be back again. Gary D. Let's not forget him, is scrolling up to the top of what we've got here. And Harold O'Keefe with one retracted message. Janie Walker. I don't know if Dana Shiver dropped into the show or not, but there we go. That's it, folks. We'll be back again, same time, 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time this coming Tuesday night, 11 out on the East Coast. That's, of course, Wednesday here, 1 p.m. in the afternoon with the news. And going to start all over again next Friday night with more quality feature guest conversations and interviews coming your way. Until we meet again, actually before, we should also let people know we have a website, WPRPN.com. PayPal donations can be sent to us via Pirate One Radio at protonmail.com. Check out all the show description links and social media links, URLs we have available down via the YouTube show description area, and take it from there. So, on behalf of Captain Long John Sinclair and all the crew here aboard the Robin Hood, until we meet again out on the high digital seas, I'm your host as always, the ship's Chief Communications Officer, Jaffe Ryder. Yeah, what is the sound of one hand clapping? I guess it depends if you have a pirate hook on the end of it or not. So maybe think about that. How's that for a new Zen koan? Happy sailing, everybody.
I know. There we be. Having carefully looked over each of our navigation panel instruments,
checking every level, switch, dial, cable, knob, and pulley, by all accounts and indications, we indeed see it's time, once again, to drop anchor inside Mystic Bay.
draw an end to yet another week of World Pirate Radio Live.
Remember,
If you're looking for a little more animated online action,
keep in mind we've likely got yet another great free-flowing Rogues Gallery after show
Coming up for the next hour in one of our more premium, exclusive, and remote digital underground online pirate hideaways. Also, if you yourself have a new, novel, intriguing, or otherwise underreported idea, unique individual, or pressing item in mind, be sure to either drop us a line directly over on WPRPN.com or fire us a quick email via pirateoneradio@protonmail.com. We're always open to exploring fresh creative suggestions, intriguing guest ideas, cutting-edge discussion topics, and captivating themes. Remember, WPRPN.com member site subdomain links are also always available. Great for artists, musicians, podcasters, bloggers, social media personalities, or pretty much just any old land lover looking to boost their online visibility, presence, and reach. Basic personal profile accounts can be launched for just $60 per year. Staking your claim now helps not only strengthen you and the network, we're also looking out for the little guy. That's right, folks. As much as half of all WPRPN's profits are redirected right back into the hands of the people who really need it most. Community charity. After all, we are the Robin Hood. You can further embark on your own personal pirate journey by either liking, sharing, commenting on, subscribing to, or just following us via virtually any mainstream social media platform, including Twitter, Facebook, Gab, or Minds.com. So don't forget to become engaged. Until we meet again out on the high digital seas. I'm your host as always, the ship's Chief Communications Officer, Jaffe Ryder. Tally-ho.